Sri Lanka is one united nation again and fast on its path to a new future. A future for which a generation of Sri Lankans have paid for dearly, some with the ultimate sacrifice. The Sri Lanka Rupawahini Corporation, being the premier television network in Sri Lanka, considered it our duty to be actively involved in the formulation of that future. Thus, we bring you Checkmate, the stories of some extraordinary people who have gone that extra mile, set out that extra hour to achieve success in very ordinary circumstances, so that you too may be encouraged to aspire for such greatness. Checkmate, a new Sri Lanka, together we can. Hello everyone and welcome to another program of Checkmate. We at Checkmate have been very fortunate to have invited and had amongst us as our guests the creme de la creme of Sri Lanka's professionals mostly. As you know, our production team takes meticulous care in selecting whom we invite, because it goes very much with the ethos of Checkmate that we want to archive in Sri Lanka Rupawahini Corporation for our future generations the best of our professionals, those who have gone that extra mile to make something more out of their lives in their particular careers, so that the future generations coming will have it for posterity's sake. They'll have it saved that they can watch, learn, emulate in their quest to make a better Sri Lanka in this new future that we have now been given. And tonight is yet another such great in another one of our areas, and that is of foreign affairs and Sri Lanka's foreign policy. As you know, several commentators argue that Sri Lanka's introduction into foreign diplomacy and international affairs lies in epic environs. In fact, Dr. Manel argues that in his book that with the advent of Buddhism, with Arahat Mahinda, which was a diplomatic mission sent by the mighty Emperor Asoka of the Mauryan dynasty, and from then up to now, Sri Lanka has played a pivotal role, particularly in our golden years or the non-aligned years during the heightened Cold War in Sri Lanka's foreign relations. These men and women, while safeguarding and protecting Sri Lanka's strategic interests and our geopolitical concerns, they've also managed to play an important role in the international sphere, thus taking Sri Lanka onto the world platform. So, we have today, and we are privileged to have, one such person who has been very much in the forefront in our golden years of foreign relations. She has, amongst several other things, she's been a graduate at Oxford. She's gone on to Cambridge thereafter after recruitment. We will speak more about it as we go on, but amongst several things, she has this distinct capability and distinct quality that makes her ideal with the Checkmate ethos, and that is that she happened to be Sri Lanka's first woman career diplomat. It is our pride to have in our studio tonight Mrs. Manel Abeysekera. I want Mrs. Abeysekera, welcome to Checkmate.
Thank you so much.
We start all stories at the advent of our guest in your formative, first few years. You were an old girl at Methodist College.
Yes.
Maybe you'd like to start off, and you were also very close to your family. Your father was a civil servant. Maybe you'd like to speak a little bit about your young years.
Before that, I'd like to thank you for your very kind words and for including me in this august group that you have been interviewing. It's a great privilege for me too.
It's an honor.
Now, Methodist College you mentioned. Well, the thing I value most about my school is that I learned more than lessons. I learned about life and about how to live it and be friends with everybody, irrespective of who they were, what social status they were, and what ethnic group or whatever they might be. all human beings, and we all, Methodist College was really well known for that. Even when the girls went up to the university, they mixed so well with everybody. Nothing snooty about old Metho, as I say. So this stood me in good stead in later life, when you have to mix with so many people, not only of your country, but of other countries. And the same story. That
Speaking
all
of
other
Methodist College, Ms. Abeysekera, you were also, in addition to you, as a first woman career diplomat, Metho also have produced several other first women people, haven't they?
One was the first woman in the trade service, and the third one was the first woman in
the banking sector.
Banking sector, as a chairman of a bank.
So speak to us. You were very close to your father, who was also a civil servant, a well-respected civil servant, and your dear mother, who by the way, I must say that I'm very thankful to our guest for sending me this book, a few pictures of which our production team will be sharing with you lately. But this is wonderful reading, if not for anything else. You can go through our guest's career, entire career, her trials, her tribulations. Madam Sir. Madam Sir is the title of the book, and I've managed to pick up a lot about you by going through this. But this speaks of your young age as a child. You were very close to your family. You want to speak a little bit?
Yeah, and maybe you're interested to know that the title came from my Thai chauffeur when I landed there. That is right. Instead of his having always a male Sir. Now, my parents were... I've said in my book that I'm writing this not for any kudos or anything, but as a Christian, to honor my God, and also my parents, to whom I owe so much. Mother was, they both filled me with love and kindness and care, and mother, of course, was a disciplinarian. Father thought I should study and that kind of thing. And I wanted to walk in his footsteps, but where? I couldn't. The good old British system, women were not allowed.
Well, we are going to talk in our second segment on how you changed all that and how you changed the system, where you got women included in that. But then we go on to your education. You were then sent to Somerville in Oxford, where you are now an honorary fellow. They've honoured you by making you a fellow. But speak to us a little bit about that era, because in your book you say that at the time that you were at Oxford, that was a time that people like our dear departed, your friend, Mr. Lakshman Kadirgam, MP, President's Council, and Lalita Thulatpudi, they were presidents of the Union.
That's right.
How did it feel for you as a Sri Lankan youth, sitting there, hearing these people, knowing that these people were presidents of this Union? Tell us a little bit about that youth that you had at Oxford.
Well, actually, Lalit was junior to me, and we were great pals. And Lakshman, of course, was there for postgraduate studies. So I didn't know him that well, but I used to go to his house, and we had a lot of interaction. And I was privileged to be, of course, not only here, but there too. Women are not allowed in the...
at the Senate, the Union.
In the actual hall. We have to be in the gallery. So I watched both of them make them maiden speech as presidents from the gallery.
That's president of the Oxford Union.
Yes.
Were they immediately one after the other, or were there...
No, there was quite a bit of a gap. And I was lucky to have been there because the course was 3 years. So it would have been about that time, and I must have stayed on a bit more, something like that, before I went on, came back to Colombo.
You read history at Oxford.
That's right.
And then after appointment, we're going to talk about your appointment later, but very quickly, after your appointment, you also then thereafter went to Cambridge to learn languages. I think you studied Italian.
Yes.
You already knew French by then.
Yes, I had to know French for my history degree, but for entering Oxford, I had to send up a blank paper, but once I was there, I had to pick it up. Anyway, Cambridge was really the brainchild of Mr. Bandanayake. Not only Cambridge, all of us were sent to British universities to study the language assigned us and also other things. We were not told specifically, but we had to learn what we thought would be useful to our service, like economic history, diplomacy, diplomatic practice, and all this kind of thing. So we picked and you may be interested that I attended Lauter Park Junior's lectures,
Right.
And So this was a great, because you see in India, the government had done that to the new recruits after independence. So I think Mr. Bandanayake thought this would be a good idea to send us as well. But of course...
But you seem to have gained from that, right?
Yes, I think we...
In subsequent years where we come...
But I also felt that India, the reason they did that, was because India is so big that they don't meet with foreigners and mix that much like we do. We are always bumping into the foreigner and mixing with them. Whatever it is, it was a good insight into how people react to you and to things which are in common or not in common. And it teaches you a lot of tolerance.
Then coming on to just... we'll end your personal segment and we go on to the next. But you later on, when you're stationed in Bangkok, you meet your future partner, who we met outside Hector Abeysekera. And that entire wedding that you describe in your book. Yeah, you do your own wedding, you get your secretary to do the dressing up. It's a very rushed up affair. Talk to us a little bit.
No, actually I was very lucky. My secretary had dressed brides in Sri Lanka, and she came there looking for a job. And not that she was a good she knew stenography, but I realized she was a very brilliant woman and versatile. So that's why I recruited her. And I was lucky. I didn't know about this aspect. Then of course I have a habit of being a do-it-yourself person. Up to a point.
Surely a wedding you don't do it yourself.
Well, nobody guessed that I did it.
Well, there you go.
So anyway, it worked. Because I had the red carpet and all that, and I used the mission all-purpose room, as I called it, where we had sit-down dinners, we had cultural shows, and then my wedding as well.
That's the other thing that fascinates. You never went to book the hall. Well, you thought you just do it at home where you live.
And I didn't invite a whole lot of people because I had a diplomatic reception prior to that. Invited all my diplomatic friends, but here it was all very close friends and neighbors and Sri Lankan friends, so it wasn't such a big crowd, so it was manageable. And then of course that
was the end of the wedding.
And then we drove off, and my driver was a bit worried and asked whether he could bring the receptionist with him because he had a glass of champagne.
Well, we're going to discuss much more with Mrs. Abeysekera, particularly that career that began in Sri Lanka's golden years, as I said, of our foreign relations, of our diplomacy, and that is to come. But before we go for a very quick break, I'd like to remind you that, and thank you, that we value your contributions. Just last week, after our program, we had several of you wanting to join our fan page on Facebook. Thank you very much for your comments, your compliments. They are indeed a source of inspiration for us to do more for you, and that it shows us that Checkmate is catching up and doing what it ought to do, that it's going ahead and pursuing what we set out to pursue when we started Checkmate, that of building a better Sri Lanka. So thank you very much, particularly our overseas viewers, for your emails. Thank you very much. You'll find the email address appearing at the bottom of the screen, as well as our fan book page. Please do continue writing in. Our production team and I will go into it and get back to you, reply to you as and when we need to. So thank you very much. We're going for a short break in the company of Sri Lanka's first woman career diplomat, Mrs. Manel Abeysekera. We'll be back with you shortly. Hello and welcome back. We're in the company of Mrs. Manel Abeysekera, and this is our segment where we speak of your career and your trials, tribulations. In 1958, you entered as the first woman to enter the then Ceylon Overseas Service, subsequently the Sri Lanka Foreign Service. Now, Mrs. Abeysekera, this is a new era in our foreign relations. If we recall, 56, there had been a change of government, and Mr. Bandanayake changed the hitherto foreign policy. Some commentators call it the giving up of the colonial yoke, I remember, and we rescinded our defense agreement with Britain. So the non-alignment theme was coming to the fore. Talk to us a little bit about Sri Lanka's strategic interests, how you all manage geopolitical concerns as new entrants. First, talk to us about your entry as a first woman career diplomat.
Well, I think that was possibly a fluke because I think I stumbled upon it because by chance I saw an advertisement in the newspaper, which was a repeat of a gazette notification, saying that applications are being called for the foreign service or the overseas service.
Yes.
And then there's one sentence: a married woman must get special permission of the Public Service Commissioner.
Yes.
So I thought, aha, well, an unmarried woman might have a better chance, who knows. So I decided to apply, and as luck would have it, I was called and I got in. Now, when we joined, we were, of course, not trained, as it were. We had a good pep talk from the Foreign Secretary, Gunasena Soiza, and then later on we met the Prime Minister. And the thing was, the funny thing was, he was not in a good mood because he had, had arrested a federal party person and put him under house arrest. Yes. And my father knew him very well. So father said, darling, be careful. He's going to be in a bad mood and he may take it out on you. How right he was. Then later on he had, he said, well, you know, how naughty you men are. I was with 7 men.
Right.
Normally they would not take care of hoot about whether I was a woman or a animal.
Yep.
But that time they said, after you, they wanted me to go and sit next to the Premier. I was no
Knowing
fool.
that he was in a bad mood.
Yeah, no, they didn't know. I mean, none of us knew. But I was shrewd enough. I went round the other way and sat next to Mr. Gunasena Soiza. And the boys had to sit there. So he was asking questions. He said, tell me what's my foreign policy. Before she could finish, he asked for the next one. Then after about the third one, he said, Gunasena, I think these young people must go and read about my foreign policy. There was a little booklet printed at that stage. So off we went with our tails between our legs. And then about a week later, we were summoned again. The people had been released from house arrest. My father said, now darling, he's bound to be in a very good mood. So I said, God help me, I hope so. Then we went. And there, of course, it didn't matter where he beamed at all of us. And he turned to Mr. Soiza and said, now, Mr. Soiza, I must ask you, all this time, you had only men. Now you have this woman. Now, who is that woman, Gunasena, who has the most enormously fat legs? Who's very important in foreign affairs. I'm covering, hoping my legs are covered by the sari. And I hope, Gunasena, that the power of Babel won't become the power of Babel now. So, and father was quite right, yes.
So, but then, how did you manage this shift of foreign policy, if you like, from the former colonial inclined agenda to a non-aligned? How did you manage the shift? How did you?
Actually, Vernon Mendes was the first career diplomat. So in their time, and earlier the civil service manned the foreign service because there were no there was no direct intake into the foreign service. Now they would have had to handle the old system. Now we came at a time when we were aware, of course, we had been reading and studying about these things, but we didn't have to actually effect any transition, but we had to learn and accept that the transition had happened and understand what was the whole of East Europe was open now to us. And the thing was, I rather enjoyed it because most of those countries were new to me. I had never been in that, and I think it was the same for most of my male colleagues. So anyway...
tell us some of the names of the time. You mentioned Dr. Vernon Mendes. You, Dr. Neville Kanakarat, was Mr. Neville Kanakarat?
He was much earlier.
Right, much earlier.
But you know, the sad thing, Chrismal, is I think, I'm wondering whether I'm the only one alive. There's one man whom I can't find out, I must find out, called Sheriff, who was, he gave up the service and he went and settled down in, I think he was in New York. He was importing plants from here. I don't know that he's alive.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm the only one of this
I'm
ancient
sure we'll be
band.
Then I'm going to, as I said, I'm going to fast track you because there is this huge career in front of me.
Okay.
So much I need to discuss, but my production team will give me a little bit of
Okay,
time.
right.
So we go to the 1970s now.
Yeah.
And then once again, that we are nearing we have gone through 2 changes of government.
Yeah.
70, you're sent as a charge d'affaires in Bangkok.
Bangkok, yes.
And tell us something about your Bangkok. That was your first assignment.
Yes, yes. I must say I was quite petrified because I had always, I mean, for the first time, I was a head of mission, even though it was a lower level than ambassador.
Yes.
And I didn't know who was going to be working with me. There was no diplomatic officer, actually. But I must say that, I know, you know, Thailand is a very friendly country to us because of the Buddhist connection.
Yeah.
And they were very, very supportive, and my staff as well. And then the thing is that I realized that I always, I mean, I remember when I was there, the Supreme Patriarch died of an accident, and I did all the pujas and everything. I represented Sri Lanka as a Buddhist country in another Buddhist country. I did all the relevant things, though I'm a Christian. But when I said that I was a Christian, they appreciated it all the more.
Yes.
So I was very pleased.
Yes.
And I got on very well with the Thai staff, and that was what mattered most.
Yeah.
And the Sri Lankan crowd was excellent.
Yes. You had a visit by the Queen at the time, was that?
Yes. And she came on a state visit.
Yes.
And I was the only, I mean, I was invited as a member of the Commonwealth, as a loyal subject.
Yes.
They still hadn't become a republic.
Yes.
So
that was 72 that we declared.
Exactly. So I went and stood next to the Indian ambassador because I thought he was the last ambassador in order of precedence.
Yes.
So I thought I knew the order, so I stood there. But the photographer thought I was his wife, and spouses are not allowed.
Yes, and then there was an occasion where, once again, I'm quoting from your book, where the photographer goes to Her Majesty and says that should that wife be in the photograph?
And then she said, don't worry, everything is okay.
Because Her Majesty knew that you were representing Sri Lanka. Yeah. Well, then we have to discuss your amazing efforts, I must say. Everyone to date says that that's one of the best international conferences that the region, not just Sri Lanka, has put up. There were 92 heads of state at that non-aligned summit in 1976.
Yeah.
And 74 you become chief of protocol. And this huge assignment is landed on you.
Yeah.
Talk to us through about the non-aligned summit.
Well, this was again fortuitous because I never expected it, because I was happily in economic affairs. When somebody, I think, who had an ulterior motive, which I don't want to go into, virtually forced me into being chief of protocol. So I thought to myself, well, I went to him and said, look at me, I'm bigger than you. And don't try to shove me away like you did the previous chief of protocol, because I'm determined to show that a woman can do it. And what I did was, I decided to, you know how it is, Sri Lankans? If you don't write it down and give it to them, they say, "Ane madam, mam danne naha ne meka karanna thiyena." So what I did, there's a very, very intelligent clerical officer. I got hold of him, and both of us looked at all the areas we had to cover, separated them, and tabulated it.
Made a manual.
Like protocol manual for the non-aligned only. And so nobody, and then we allocated staff into each of those areas, so none of them could say I didn't know, but it was all there in black and white. And I rehearsed them for 2 years, from 74 when I was appointed, 76.
So how long did this entire preparation take? I mean, 76 was a summit.
Yes, so 2 years.
So 2 years you were, and were there constant meetings?
Yeah, no, I drilled them, and I think, as I also mentioned in the book, I think, that the secret of success, I think, is teamwork. I mean, I didn't do it by myself.
You had a very good team. I noticed General Article, India, and then Commander Dennis Pereira of the Air Force, and so you had some good names.
And Paddy Mendes was in charge of the airport. Now, what I'm trying to say is that Mrs. Bandanayaka was the boss. She was the head of all of us. There was a protocol team, there was Air Force team, blah, blah, blah. But all of us was one big team under her. And she very regularly had meetings to got us to report on progress on what we were doing. So that was great. And the amazing thing was that we had no, none of these gadgetry, no computers, we had only telex, not even fax. So I always say, this is my computer. And if I don't put it there, I can't find it anywhere.
No, for the sake of our viewers, we must say that I read with interest, you must somehow try and read a copy of Madam Sir. I read with interest the occasion that you drove in the middle of the road rushing to the airport, where you had heard some delegate has landed. I mean, you were dealing with people like Marshal Tito of the former Yugoslavia and the presently assassinated Colonel Gaddafi of Libya. And we also, did we also have, yes, we had Colonel Gaddafi. So 92 heads of state to deal with,
and guards of honor
and guards of honor to organize, VIP lounges to organize, and that would have been an ordeal in itself.
The VIP lounges were in my charge, but the guards of honor were done by the military, and there, I must say, General Artikala was the army commander, but General Dennis Pereira was in charge of the actual organization. And there the problem was, as you probably know, for an airline, a VIP is from ambassador up to head of state.
That's right.
So when you ask who is on board VIP, they'll give you all kinds of things. We don't know which country they are coming from. Sometimes they don't tell, and the airline can't tell. So what I did was, when I went up, I used to find out who it was, and then we had no communication. Means
but you had a walkie-talkie. I mean,
that is because I told Mrs. B, I cannot do this. And though my colleague was stingy to get it, I got it. Without that, we would have failed. Because I go up there, and if there's a mistake, I tell them. And Paddy Mendes was a superb organizer. We had a round table, a round oval or whatever, but a representative of each of these teams was there. So that at once it was conveyed, and the work was done. So these are little things that we did on the spot, through common sense, I would say.
Well, superb effort. I remember much later on, as students of international relations, we used to read only. We were never probably just toddlers at the time, but we used to read of this entire non-aligned summit of 1976. And it's a privilege and an honor to sit with the person who was head of protocol at the time today and discuss it. So well done on behalf of all Sri Lankans watching.
Thank you.
Very well done. Mrs. Abeysekera, then I'm going to fast track you once again to 1977. Once again, we have a government change.
Right.
Now, as we know, in Sri Lanka, and as indeed the rest of Asia, perhaps, we have this tendency when governments change, public servants change. For what reason, we do not know. But all governments tend to keep those close to them, and others end up pushing papers and pens in some ministry. But you have once again defied the norm. 77, a new government comes of President Jayawardena. But then immediately in 80, you are appointed ambassador to Thailand. But 77 to 80, you continue working at the ministry, and you also hold your position. Were you not seen as a Bandar Nayaka stooge or SLFP stooge? I mean, surely this...
Actually, none of us ever felt anything like that, because we were not interested in politics. Not only I, the men were also very, very interested only in doing a job. Now, the thing is that I thought that, I felt rather, that people were saying, now, that I am Mrs. Bandanaka's right-hand woman.
Right.
So I told everybody, if you think I introduce VIPs to Mrs. Bandanaka from the right side, well, I'm her right hand. If I introduce on the left side, so you take your pick. I was not, I was only working with her as the boss.
Yes.
And she appreciated what we did. And we went to her and got advice, and she helped us all the time. She was very quick at deciding things. You know, like lightning. And the only other person I can think of like that is Mr. Premadasa.
Right.
You present a problem, immediately she will decide. Like when Mr. Gaddafi was not arriving at the time he was scheduled to arriving late, I went up to her and said, Madam, now what can we do? There's only a guard of honor left to come to area, but there's no minister even. At once she said, send the Minister of Education. So I did that. So like that, I mean, very few people, they won't say humming and hawing.
You seem to have had the privilege of working with several heads of state in different governments. So I mean, that's obviously the cream of experience, the wealth of experience that we admire you for. Then come to 1980. Once again, another incident before we quickly wrap up for another break. You were appointed ambassador by the then government in 1980 and you go to Thailand, you return to Thailand.
Back again, yes.
But this time, of course, as the head of the mission.
Yes.
And then we have the famous or infamous hijack of the Alitalia plane of by Sepal article. Sepal Ekanaik. Sepal Ekanaik. We spoke of gender Sepal No, I beg your pardon. Sepal Ekanaik. And I was interested in your book. Unknown to the Alitalia staff at the airport, you had learnt Italian.
Exactly.
As in your training, you spoke Italian, you knew Italian.
Yeah, and I understood what they were saying.
So talk to us a little bit about that incident. I mean, I'm sure everyone would love to hear about it.
No, the thing was that I even spoke to the Italian ambassador when I called on him. I spoke to him in Italian. So later when Sepal was coming down from the plane and into the coach, he told me, Manel, you never told me that nobody knew, I never knew that you knew it. And I said, Ambassador Ripandeli, you have forgotten, I spoke to you in Italian. And, yes, so you did. So that stood me in good stead. And I think these are things which I think I like to call it God, but anybody can call it what they like. But these things, I was fortunate to enjoy that. At the right moment,
at the right
moment, something happens, and then.
I mean, you were sent to study Italian in the 1950s.
Yes.
You never knew that in 1980 this was going to help you avert a possible hazardous situation.
But the other thing is that Sepal was extremely cooperative. Don't ask me why. But he was extremely. Sometimes I spoke to him in a cajoling way. Sometimes very firmly.
This was now, for the sake of our viewers, the plane was parked on the tarmac in Bangkok airport.
Yes, quite fairly visible to the road.
And he had already taken hostage.
Yes. No, he didn't take hostages.
He only took the aircraft. Weren't there passengers on board?
There were passengers. But then they were all released, he said.
But he was threatening to blow up the aircraft.
Yeah, he said he had explosives around his shoulders and it was covered with a shawl. Now I must say, our police was excellent. I had sent a telex asking asking for Sepal's history. So I thought, my goodness, if he knew wiring, it's possible that he had wires around his explosives around. So we couldn't take any chances.
Yeah. Well, there was once again a situation diffused. And that was not the only hijack. You handled two hijack situations.
Yeah, one before Sepal.
Yes. Well, we're going to take a quick break now. Once again, it's an absolute pleasure in the company of Mrs. Manel Abeysekera. Our next segment will be talking of her experiences and going to the future. What this great lady who's been through years and years of Sri Lanka's foreign relations has to share about Sri Lanka going into the future and our present and our future in international affairs. So don't go away. We'll be back after a short break. Hello and welcome back. We are back in the company of Mrs. Manel Abeysekera, Sri Lanka's first woman career diplomat, on Checkmate tonight. And Mrs. Abeysekera, we do this to our guests. I'm sure you'd have noticed by now. You said you watched a couple of programs. We take you from your various quotations to the press and whatnot, and we ask our guests to explain that because it's important for the people out there to know. Writing to the island in April this year, you say this: it seems to me, therefore, that what we need is to build a sense of trust. You're talking nation building, or the concept of nation building, among and between various peoples of the common descent living in Sri Lanka, within a state where equality, human rights, freedom, security exists for all, irrespective of whether they belong to the smaller or larger nations. You seem to take this concept of a state
Yeah.
and several nations living within that state. You want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, because in the good old days, when the term nation state came into being, I think it was meant to be in a technical sense for, you know, like for conferences and all that kind of thing. There, even though now they said France, Britain, but without realizing that within those countries also there were little groupings. Now in Sri Lanka, especially because we've had problems with this kind of differences, what I feel is that the Tamils, the Muslims, the Malays, the Burghers, whoever, and the Sinhalese, they are all nations, meaning born from the word natus, and that they are naturally they tend to be together. Now on the other hand, I do think that there were as many Tamils living with the Sinhalese in the south as in the north, if I'm not mistaken. And I can't see them giving up their lucrative work here and going join. So I think that nobody needs to carve out anything. We should all, as little nations, pool our resources together, give ourselves the same rights as the other, so that on a basis of equality and sort of correct relationships, we can make this nation state, state of nations, I should say, as the government wants to be the best in Asia or the leader in Asia or whatever. But we must understand we can't talk of nation building, then which nation are you going to build? So that's
you're talking about the concept of unity in diversity.
That's right, correct.
Taking you on from there, you also, you're a prolific writer. I mean, if not for anything else, I must advocate your book, because just the manner in which you've written, it's even if no one wanted to learn about international relations, just this is interesting reading in itself. Madam, sir, I really recommend this. But even you're writing to the papers, you seem to approach the concepts in the way it should. You refer to our island, and you once again you take this connotation, no man is an island, and you advert that to our island nation. And you say, similarly, no island can be an island. You're writing and saying, I quote you, hence it follows that whilst a state can be neutral in terms of linkage, it is not possible for that to ignore observance of good international interstate relations and behavior in principle. Now this is important in this sense, because there seems to be these two schools of thought when Sri Lanka's obligations in international relations are concerned, that we can just shut out and continue to be proud in what we believe in without an explanation, or we can, the other school tends to believe that no, you must explain whatever, you can still remain neutral, but you still have obligations internationally to go out and explain. This seems to be what you're aiming at when you say, just as much as no man is an island, no island state can be an island in the international community without accepting reciprocal norms of good conduct internally and externally. You want to elaborate on?
Yes, I do think so, because to me, diplomacy is to agree or agree to disagree, but in an amicable way. And we may have people who are criticizing us and who disagree with us or tell us we have not been accountable. Well, we have to explain, and then and also if we have by accident even, as I have said in another place, we know that the LTT were a master at subterfuge. It could be that they had sort of confused
or given false information.
Not only given, might have pretended to be the military, or I don't know what. But what I'm saying is,
they may have created a bad picture.
We have to try and accept some little thing, even that, because I remember, it's in my book again, when I was in Germany, I wrote so many times asking, and even earlier, and also when the JVP was very active in a violent way, to let me have any records of any court-martialing or anything like that of any military or government person, so that it carries credibility then, because otherwise you are not doing anything to investigate anything. No,
so that you can explain it there.
Exactly.
So from the perspective
and then it's convincing.
Yeah. So from the perspective of Sri Lanka's emissaries abroad,
exactly,
in their relations in those countries, what you're trying to say is that it will be much more convenient and easy for you.
Convincing also.
Convincing to interact internationally.
Exactly.
If you had that machinery in place here.
Because nobody is absolutely innocent like one human being. The state is also like that. We can be guilty of some little thing. So let's admit it, whatever it is, and let us be brave enough to be answered, not in a belligerent way. I mean, I don't believe in that, but in a very sort of, I won't say diplomatic, that's too technical, but in a very understandable, intelligible fashion. And my idea of diplomacy is to be persuasive. You explain something and persuade that person who starts off by being very anti-you, and gradually you can bring him round if you take the trouble. But there is a technique in doing that. You can't.
That's the art of diplomacy.
And also, you know, I always tell the army people, you people say attack is the best form of defense, and I don't agree about that with regard to diplomacy.
I think former Foreign Minister Lakshman Kadirgama said it best when he was speaking at one of these functions of the BCIS. He said that even when you disagree, you need to do it diplomatically.
That's
so
right.
the other side hardly knows that you disagree.
Yes, that is quite true. It's very subtle.
I want to take you, once having spoken of the dear departed Minister Lakshman Kadirgama, later on in 2004, having stepped down from your hustle bustle of globetrotting years, you are then put as into training of Sri Lanka Foreign Service.
Exactly.
Do you want to talk to us a little bit about how that came about with Mr. Lakshman Kadirgama?
Actually, Mr. Lakshman had, I don't know how, he sometimes picks on something, then when it's interesting, he looks at it. He had come across my protocol manual, not the non-aligned one, but the general protocol manual. He told me to update it, which I did, and he took me from retirement and said, now you train the Foreign Service officers. He meant the young ones, but unfortunately the young ones have not come in. So he said, you start with the people already in the ministry, which I did. And I really enjoyed that, because I got foreign diplomats, ambassadors and all to come, and also all the heads of department whose subjects were relevant to foreign affairs. And everybody, and a lot of the people who were there from the foreign ministry, they still tell me how much they benefit from it. But regrettably, I am not sure whether there's any such training now. And that is a great pity, because you're not born a diplomat. You have to be trained to be a diplomat. And of course, people must have some qualities which you recognize. That's why you presumably take them into the service. And then you refine those traits and those capabilities with training. That's
where I want to take you to. I know this is a fairly controversial issue, but you yourself, I mean, it's, I suppose, chicken and egg. You yourself come from a fairly affluent family. You've known, as you very correctly say in your book, you've known the Bandaranayakas, you've known Saivo Jaini, you have met, and your father was a senior civil servant. So even when you went for your interview, I mean, it's presumed that people knew who you were, but then you served under different tenures. You proved yourself in your career. So my question is this: there is this constant canker, if you like, that foreign service appointments are given, not just in Sri Lanka, even in the United States or England, that it's dished out as a sort of a santosam or a pleasure thing at any regime, that foreign appointments are given to those who you like. Is there, my question to you is, okay, admitting that that is so, like I said, even from your background, you are known to people. As long as that person can do the job, is there any problem in that? Or what is it that we can do to neutralize the situation? If you feel that that is not correct, then what can we do? But if that is so, is there anything wrong in putting someone in place because career diplomats, if I remember correctly, I just want to add to that, up to about 1977-78, the then head of state held the foreign ministry. It was only after 78 that the foreign ministry became a ministry of its own.
That's
up
true.
to then all, including Mr. Bandaranaike, Mrs. Bandaranaike, Mr. Jawad, it was Mr. Javadana that changed it to have a Mr. S.S. Hamid as a foreign minister.
Because of the executive president.
Executive president. So they were the foreign minister as well, as much as being the head of state.
Quite right.
So is there anything wrong then in putting your political appointee, if you like, and if that is so, how do you neutralize it?
Well, there's no need to neutralize if the political favorite, or who you like to call it, is competent in that particular field. But how do you know he's competent without testing him out? He has not been in that field before you appoint him, isn't that right? Then you decide to appoint him, and after you appoint him, you can't let him flounder. So how would you balance it? I mean, people must appoint diplomats who can be trusted to do a job and do what the government wants them to do in that context. So,
but how do you distinguish the career diplomat to that then? I mean, the career diplomats have to go through exams, they have to be picked through an exam.
Trained.
So how do you distinguish between the two?
No, it's very simple. Believe me, some career diplomats are equally politicized. I mean, they run behind the politicians all the time. Can't help it. That is human nature. If they see an advantage in being somebody's man or woman, they'll do it. So that is human nature, and you can't change that. But you have to appoint somebody not merely because you like him, but because you see some substance in him which he can be expected to utilize
for the benefit of the country abroad.
Exactly.
That's exactly what I'm trying to get at. I mean,
there must be lots of people like that.
Yes.
But for God's sake, choose them, not everybody willy-nilly, you see.
But then that is the difference now. Even whatever manner of picking that was there in the 50s, after selecting you, your batch, you were sent for training to Cambridge for 1 year of international languages and the laws and whatnot. Then you were sent to the Commonwealth Office for training. What can you say about the training that goes on now? I mean, you were involved in the training.
I don't know of any training that goes on now. You tell me. I don't know.
But so what were you doing at...
No, that's finished. At 2007 it was over.
That was, the training of diplomats was over in 2000?
Lakshman died.
Yes.
And I was also,
so that came to the end of the...
Yeah.
Right. So you are not aware of any training that goes on now?
Not that there is a Bandaranaike...
Center for International Studies.
No, that of course is for academic work.
Yes.
Then there's the BIDTI, which where I also, used to be invited to give lectures on protocol and whatnot.
Right.
But that is not training. People are taken, I'm not talking about BCI, I'm talking about BIDTI.
Yes.
People are taken in, if they want to follow the course, they call it as a... So,
I see. So that's not being recruited and trained?
No,
like
that is not, and they are not likely to get into... You know how our young people today, I feel sad about it, but maybe it's necessary in their view. They go on collecting certificates. I did this course, I did that, you know that. So this is for that, they follow the course. But they don't necessarily come into the diplomatic service. So you have to have a scheme. My point is, if you don't have a scheme, whichever way it is, you won't get the right person. It doesn't matter if they are great favorites of whoever it is, but they must be able to deliver the goods.
That's exactly what I'm trying to get. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but we got to wrap up. But I was very interested. At the end of your book, you have a column, you put on a column, the lessons learned on looking back. And just for the sake of our future Sri Lankan diplomats watching out there, as you say, it's much the needed they are now if there is no training. Here is a lady who has gone the length and breadth of it. And in your lessons, you say two that sort of took my mind, which I thought I'll put to you. At number 8, you say, speak up to seniors, even ministers, prime ministers and presidents, if you are in an advisory capacity, especially if they are about to embark on a wrong track in terms of one's own areas of competence. My experience is that they understand if matters are explained politely. Then at 10, you say, as a public officer, though one may have one's own political views, they must not influence one's work, nor must politicians unless you think they are advocating the right action. Speak to us about those two.
Yeah, I think this is very necessary because, for one thing, I never have had any difficulty with any seniors, whether it's a president or prime minister, they all, but there's a way of speaking to them. You don't sort of, it shouldn't be like a bull in a china shop. Yeah. You have to be very tactful, and if you explain nicely, because I gave one example, I'll quote it if I may. President Jayawardena, I wanted him to open a women's conference, a regional one which I had organized. Mr. Manel said, I can't go and tell him that, you come, and I went. Then I went to him and said, oh, what can I do for you, very politely. So I told him, no, I can't open this conference because there's a youth conference coming up. I've told Mr. Ranjit Wickremesinghe to open it, but he is youth minister. Yeah. I said, you're right, sir. Excellency, you are the Minister for Women's Affairs. He got such a shock because he really was. There was no minister above the secretary. Yeah. I'll do it, he said, and he did it. So what I mean, you have to use strategy.
Just the way you put it across.
Strategy, polite language, and be persuasive. Diplomacy is basically the art of persuasion. To my mind, whether it's your own people or the foreigner, if you can persuade people that you are here to do a job of work for the good of all, I mean, I have never found any difficulty.
Well, we need to wrap up, but then, as always, we bring our guests to the studio selected for their expertise, meticulously picked, and this is your time, your opportunity to speak to that future Sri Lankan watching, the future Sri Lankan who may be one day representing Sri Lanka at our missions abroad, the future Sri Lankan who will one day be taking Sri Lanka leagues ahead from where you and I have brought the country, or where you and I are now. This is your chance. What does Manel Abeysekera, Sri Lanka's first woman career diplomat, have to tell that future Sri Lankan watching out there?
Well, I am not presumptuous that I am a person who could advise the future generations. I'm sure they are well up to it. They have probably got a better education than all of us in the past, and a varied one, and they will rise to the occasion, I'm sure. And I just put those things down in case somebody wants to know how I did my job. And if they think there's any value in it, by all means, use it. But I am not a didactic person at all. I believe in learning and living, how do you say it?
Living as you learn, learning as you live.
Whichever.
Learning as you live.
And I'm sure they are up to it, and I don't think I need to say anything, but by all means I'm always ready for any advice. If anyone, I've always tell these young people, especially people who I think will make good foreign service officers, to take the chance and find out more about it. And there are lots of ways of finding out. There are so many people willing to advise them, and then there are all these people who are, let's await this report now. Most of the people who are writing them, quite a few of them are people who have been diplomats or in the diplomatic milieu. Yeah.
Well, there you go, our Checkmate viewers. We come to another exciting end of a very exciting program. It's been an absolute honor to have Mrs. Abeysekera in our studios. A personal privilege to us in the production team to have one of our heroes, people that we have watched and learned from in our studio. That brings us to the end of Checkmate tonight. Please do keep writing into us, interacting with us on Facebook and the email and internet. And we will see you again on another program very shortly in the not too distant future. Mrs. Abeysekera, it's been an honor, privilege. Thank you very much. Ayubowan.
Thank you. It's been mutual for me too.
Well, we've come to the end of another Checkmate. Lives of ordinary people on an extraordinary journey. With the hope of seeing you again on another one of our programs, I'm about to bid you adieu. But I do so with these words from H.W. Longfellow. This is for you, future Sri Lanka. Heights by great men, reached and kept, were not attained by sudden flight. For they, whilst their companions slept, were toiling upwards in the night. The future of Sri Lanka is with you, our youth, our generations to come. Sri Lanka, Gokul.